Imagine an old man lying in a sterile, brightly lit hospital room.
Okay, setting a pretty heavy scene here.
Yeah, it is. The heart monitors are, beeping out this steady, indifferent rhythm. His breathing is shallow.
Right.
The room is quiet, and he is just staring up at the ceiling, looking back over 80 years of existence, and suddenly he breaks.
Oh, wow.
He bursts into bitter, agonizing tears, and his voice just cracks as he screams out, "I've wasted it. I've wasted it."
That is such a chilling image.
It really is. Well, welcome to Reform Thinking. I'm so glad you could be here with us today.
Yes, thank you for tuning in. It is great to be here.
So our mission for this session is an extensive examination of a staggering sermon essay based on John Piper's book, Don't Waste Your Life.
Right, along with a really intense theological look at the text of Mark chapter 8, verses 34 through 38.
And we are starting with that haunting autobiographical scene, because that visceral cry, that realization of a life spent building monuments of straw, only to recognize at the very end that the entire endeavor was utterly bankrupt, well, it is the terrifying diagnostic of the human condition.
It forces a collision with reality, the kind of reality that we often spend our entire lives trying to avoid.
Spot on. So today we're going to look at the historical, blood-soaked context of these specific verses, the intense Greek grammar of Christ's call, and what all of this requires of a person's career, marriage, and retirement today.
That weeping man in the hospital bed, he basically presents the baseline premise drawn directly from our text today.
Which is what, in a nutshell?
Well, the overarching truth we are looking at is that an unwasted life is not defined by busyness. It is not defined by the applause of the crowd, the accumulation of advanced degrees, or even, by a long, healthy lifespan.
Right. Those are the usual metrics.
But they fall short. A life is unwasted only if the entire stream of existence has flowed toward the glory of God in Jesus Christ. Every single other measurement of success falls drastically short of the eternal ledger.
So our sources today are constructing a rigorous argument showing that a person can gain the entire material world, live comfortably in a beautiful suburb, retire with a massive investment portfolio, and still arrive at the judgment seat of Christ with completely empty hands.
Yes, and we're going to see that this reality is anchored not in subjective feelings, but in the objective historical revelation of God.
I want to start right there, actually, unpacking that contrast between subjective feelings and objective reality. Because the sources bring up two radically different views of existence that really clash.
They really do. It is a stark contrast.
On one side, we have Bob Dylan's 2016 Nobel Prize acceptance speech. In that speech, he claimed that if a song moves you, that is all that is significant.
Right. He explicitly said he did not care to know what his songs meant. He prioritized the subjective feeling above all else.
And then, on the opposite side, we have the opening of the Westminster Shorter Catechism, written centuries ago. It states with absolute clarity, man's chief end is to glorify God and to enjoy him forever.
Those are two completely incompatible ways of viewing the universe.
So let me play devil's advocate for a second here. What is so wrong with Bob Dylan's perspective?
That is a fair question.
I mean, what is wrong with just letting art move you, letting life move you? Why does the Catechism view that subjective freedom as structurally bankrupt? Isn't that just a harsh, rigid way to look at human expression?
Well, it sounds rigid to the modern ear because we are completely immersed in what sociologists call moralistic therapeutic deism.
Okay, that is a mouthful. Break that down for us.
Gladly. It explains the mechanism behind Bob Dylan's perspective and why our culture applauds it. So moralistic means the goal of life is just to be a decent, nice person.
Just do no harm, basically.
Right. Therapeutic means the central goal of the universe is for you to feel happy and secure. And deism means God exists, but he is basically a cosmic butler or a therapist who stays out of your way until you need a problem solved.
Wow. A cosmic butler. That paints quite a picture.
It does. And when a society adopts the mindset that being moved or feeling authentic is the highest good, it builds a foundation out of sand.
Because feelings are so fickle.
Precisely. The reason the Catechism pushes back so hard against this is because feelings change. If your entire life is built on what moves you in the moment, what happens when you face a brutal cancer diagnosis?
Or the sudden loss of a child.
Yes. What happens when you reach the threshold of eternity? The therapeutic foundation collapses entirely under the weight of real suffering.
So Dylan's assertion is treated by modern culture as authentic, but it leaves humanity on the margins of reality.
We are catechized by our culture to believe that meaning is entirely self-created. But the Westminster Shorter Catechism cuts through that fog by establishing that human existence is a covenantal obligation designed to mirror the supreme worth of the Creator.
So when you treat God like a cosmic butler, you are essentially firing him from being the author of reality and taking the job yourself.
That is a brilliant way to phrase it.
Yes, there is a visual mention in the source material that sticks with me. It is a simple kitchen plaque that reads, "Only one life, 'twill soon be past. Only what's done for Christ will last."
That is such a sharp, jarring contrast to the way our culture operates today.
It really is. I look at modern secular culture and it feels like reading a choose-your-own-adventure book, except every single page is totally blank.
Oh, that is a great analogy.
You are handed the book at birth and told, you write the story. You are the master of your own essence. You invent your own meaning. But if I have to write every page myself, that sounds exhausting.
It is incredibly exhausting.
Is this intense cultural pressure to be the master of our own essence actually creating the very terror and anxiety that leads someone to that deathbed realization that they have wasted their life?
Yes, without a doubt. The burden of creating your own meaning is an agonizing weight that the human soul was never designed to carry.
Because we are creatures, not the creator.
Right. When a creature attempts to act as the sovereign author of reality, the result is exhaustion and existential dread. The anxiety of our age stems directly from this attempt to carry the universe on our own shoulders.
Which is impossible.
It is. Without the objective anchor of God's glory, you are forced to constantly justify your own existence. You have to prove that your career, your romantic relationships, and your hobbies are somehow validating your worth.
And those things fade. They are temporal.
So they can never provide a secure foundation. The terror of the old man on his deathbed is the sudden, catastrophic realization that the blank pages he spent his life filling were burned up the moment he faced eternity.
He played the game of self-creation, and he lost everything.
The alternative to this subjective drifting is not found by looking inward. It is grounded in a specific historical moment, an alternative that Christ offered to a crowd in the first century.
Right, and if we are going to talk about that first century alternative, we have to look at the text of Mark 8, where Jesus tells the crowd to take up their cross.
Yes, that is the pivotal text here.
But I have to admit, I read those words, and they feel incredibly sanitized to me. I see crosses everywhere today.
Right, as fashion accessories.
Yeah, they are polished gold necklaces, they are diamond-encrusted earrings, they are aesthetic logos carved into the wooden signs of suburban churches.
The symbol has lost its shock value.
Completely. We even use the phrase cross to bear to describe a minor annoyance, like having a difficult mother-in-law or dealing with a trick knee.
Which is a massive distortion of what it meant.
So I always thought of the cross as just a religious symbol. But based on the historical reality of Mark's gospel, did Jesus mean this as a metaphor? What was the actual physical reality of the cross in the Roman Empire?
The cross, or stauros in the original Greek, was emphatically not a metaphor. And it was certainly not a piece of decorative jewelry. We have completely stripped it of its offense and its horror.
What was the context when Mark wrote this down?
Well, Mark's gospel was written in Rome during the 60s AD under the brutal, unhinged persecution of the Emperor Nero. Christians were experiencing horrific, state-sponsored violence.
I have read a bit about Nero. It was an absolute nightmare.
It was beyond a nightmare. Believers were covered in animal skins to be torn apart by wild dogs in the gladiatorial arenas. They were covered in flammable pitch tied to stakes and used as human torches to light Nero's garden parties.
That is just stomach-turning.
In that environment, crucifixion was an instrument of absolute social deconstitution, public humiliation, and torturous execution. It was reserved exclusively for the absolute lowest echelons of society.
Like slaves and violent rebels, right?
Yes, and insurrectionists against the state.
Yeah.
Roman citizens were legally exempt from crucifixion because it was considered too degrading for Roman blood.
Wow, they legally protected their own from it.
The Roman statesman Cicero famously called it a disgusting penalty, arguing that the very word should be banished from a citizen's thoughts, eyes, and ears.
I didn't realize the stigma was that heavy. It was the equivalent of wearing an electric chair or a lethal injection gurney around your neck. It was a symbol of absolute state terror.
Actually, it was worse than an electric chair.
Really? How so?
Because an electric chair is designed to end life quickly. The cross was engineered by the Romans to prolong agony for days. The victim was stripped entirely naked, paraded through the crowded streets, carrying the heavy wooden crossbeam while being whipped, and then nailed up to suffocate slowly as their lung cavity collapsed.
That is horrific.
It was designed to erase a person's dignity entirely and send a message to anyone watching. And that message was, do not defy Rome. This was a direct political clash.
A clash of loyalties.
Yes. Declaring Iesous Kyrios, Jesus is Lord, was an act of political treason against the state, which demanded the confession, Kaiser Kyrios, Caesar is Lord.
So when Jesus looked at the crowd and told them to take up your cross, the original audience would have felt a cold dread in the pit of their stomachs.
They heard a literal call to prepare for a torturous execution. They heard a summons to walk the path of imperial condemnation.
And Mark was writing this to a fragile underground church in Rome, providing them with a manual for survival.
Spot on. By recording Jesus' command, Mark was showing these persecuted believers that their suffering under Nero was not a sign that God had abandoned them. Rather, it was the supreme validation of their discipleship.
That makes the timeline of Mark's gospel fascinating because, Jesus doesn't drop this terrifying reality on page 1.
Right, he builds up to it.
This demand happens at a precise structural hinge in the narrative. Mark chapter 8 is the midpoint of the entire gospel.
It is the watershed moment.
Up until this point, Jesus has been healing people, calming storms, and casting out demons. The crowd loves him. But right here in chapter 8, the narrative shifts from the recognition of his identity to the shocking revelation of his mission.
We see the healing of the blind man at Bethsaida, then Peter's famous confession at Caesarea Philippi where he says, "You are the Christ."
But immediately after Peter says that, Jesus drops a heavy bomb. He gives his first passion prediction.
Right. He says the Son of Man must suffer, be rejected by the religious leaders, and be killed.
And then Peter pulls him aside and actually rebukes him for saying it.
Which is a bold move for a disciple.
Definitely. I have to ask, why did Mark place the healing of the blind man right before this conversation?
The literary placement is highly intentional. Mark structures this transition to show us the mechanism of how spiritual sight works.
Okay, break that down for me.
The healing of the blind man at Bethsaida happens in 2 stages, which is unique in the Gospels. First, Jesus touches his eyes, and the man says he sees people, but they look like trees walking around.
So his vision is still blurry.
Yes. Then Jesus touches his eyes a second time, and his vision is fully restored. That physical healing functions as a living object lesson for the disciples' blurry spiritual vision.
I see the connection now.
Peter can see the title clearly. He rightly confesses Jesus as the Christ, the Messiah. But Peter's vision is severely distorted by the cultural expectations of a triumphalist political Messiah.
Because the Jews of that day expected a military conqueror.
Precisely. They wanted someone who would ride into Jerusalem, slaughter the Roman legions, and establish an earthly kingdom.
So when Jesus introduces the necessity of suffering and death, Peter recoils. Peter wants the crown, but he utterly rejects the cross.
He wants the glory without the pain.
I think of Peter's reaction like a well-meaning friend trying to talk you out of a highly dangerous yet absolutely necessary medical procedure.
That is a really good way to look at it.
Let's say you have a life-threatening tumor. The surgeon says they have to cut you open, and the recovery will be agonizing. Your friend loves you. They do not want to see you in pain, so they tell you to cancel the surgery.
Even though canceling it means certain death.
Right. Canceling the surgery means the disease will kill you. Peter thought he was protecting Jesus, but Jesus snaps back with, "Get behind me, Satan."
That is an intense thing to call your lead disciple.
Seriously, was Peter actually possessed, or is Jesus pointing to something else?
Jesus is pointing to the origin of the theology Peter is espousing. By saying, "Get behind me, Satan," Jesus clarifies a massive theological truth. Any theology that attempts to separate Christ from his appointed suffering is demonic in origin.
Wow, that is a heavy statement.
It is. To seek kingdom glory without the substitutionary atonement of the cross is to align with the agenda of hell. Satan's primary goal in the wilderness temptations was to offer Jesus all the kingdoms of the world without having to go to the cross.
And Peter is unwittingly offering the exact same temptation.
That is right. The human heart recoils from the cross because the cross annihilates human pride. By nature, fallen humanity operates on a theology of glory.
We want a religion that enhances our self-esteem, right?
We want a system that validates our earthly ambitions and leaves our autonomy entirely intact. We basically want a life coach.
We want someone to give us a pep talk so we can achieve our own goals.
Spot on. But the cross does the direct opposite. The theology of the cross exposes our absolute moral bankruptcy.
It is the ultimate leveler.
It declares that we are so sinful, so completely unable to save ourselves, that the only possible remedy was the violent substitutionary death of the incarnate Son of God.
So to accept the path of the King is to admit that all our self-righteousness, all our good deeds, and all our moral efforts are completely worthless for salvation.
It requires us to abandon the illusion that we can contribute even a single drop of merit to our right standing before God. The natural man despises that level of helplessness.
It makes a lot of sense why Peter pushed back so hard. So immediately after putting Peter in his place and exposing that demonic theology of glory, Jesus turns to the entire crowd.
He addresses everyone, not just the inner circle.
Which is a detail I find really interesting. He does not pull Peter aside into a private room to give him advanced leadership training. He calls the disciples and the crowd together.
He completely denies the idea of a two-tier Christianity.
You know, the idea that there are regular, saved Christians who go to heaven, and then a special elite group of super Christians who go on to become disciples.
Jesus shatters that completely.
He issues 3 distinct commands in verse 34 to everyone listening. Deny yourself, take up your cross, and follow me.
Those are incredibly dense words.
What is the actual Greek grammar happening here? Let's get into the mechanics of this text.
The Greek grammar in verse 34 is intensely rigorous and demands absolute surrender. Let us look at the first command, deny yourself. The Greek word used here is aparnizasto.
Aparnizasto. Okay, what does that carry?
This is not the standard word for simple denial, like denying you ate the last cookie in the jar. It is an intensive compound verb that means to completely disown or legally sever a connection with something.
Legally sever a connection, like a contract.
Yes, to understand this, we have to look at the ancient Greco-Roman legal system. This specific term was used in legal proceedings when a father legally disowned a rebellious son.
Oh, wow, so it was an official decree.
The father would stand before a magistrate and officially strip the son of his family name, his inheritance, and his standing in the household. The tie was completely legally severed.
That's permanent.
By using this word, Jesus is commanding the disciple to legally and structurally disown the self as the master of destiny. You are abdicating all rights of self-ownership.
That concept of a legal buyout or a legal disowning makes a lot of sense. It is like the modern equivalent of someone going to a courthouse to legally emancipate themselves from a highly toxic, abusive family.
That is a great modern parallel.
Or going in to legally change your given name. You walk out of that courthouse and the old ties are severed. The old authority structure has zero legal claim on you anymore. The contract isn't renegotiated. It is terminated.
That is the level of finality Jesus is talking about.
But let's bring this down to reality. It is Tuesday morning. I am stuck in rush hour traffic. I am drinking lukewarm coffee. Somebody cuts me off on the highway and I am furious.
We have all been there.
What does abdicating self-ownership actually look like in that mundane moment or when a person walks into the office?
On a Tuesday morning, abdication of self-ownership means that your agenda, your finances, your reactions, and your ambitions are no longer yours to dictate. You view yourself as a steward, not an owner.
So it changes your whole baseline reaction to things.
When someone cuts you off in traffic, the instinct of the flesh is to rage because your rights were violated, your safety was threatened, and your pride was injured. But if you have legally disowned yourself, the self that demands respect is dead.
That is a tough pill to swallow.
It changes how you react to an insult at the office, too. If a coworker takes credit for your project, you do not need to fiercely and viciously defend your reputation because that reputation was nailed to a Roman cross.
You belong to Christ now.
Yes. If you are a business owner, abdication of self-ownership means your primary goal is no longer maximizing profit to build a personal empire. Your business becomes a platform to conduct commerce with absolute integrity, reflecting the character of God, and using your resources to fund gospel advancement.
And if you are a parent,
you stop viewing your children as accessories to your own fulfillment or as trophies to boost your social status. You view them as eternal souls entrusted to your care.
that is a massive paradigm shift. It completely reorients every interaction. And I imagine it makes sense of the verb tenses Jesus uses next.
Yes, the verb tenses are critical here. The first two commands, deny yourself and take up your cross, or erato in Greek, are in the aorist tense.
What does the aorist tense signify?
In Greek grammar, the aorist tense indicates a definitive historical break. It is a decisive, completed action. You do not gradually deny yourself over decades. You make a revolutionary, once-for-all commitment to execute the old self-rule.
So it is a line in the sand.
Precisely. But the third command, follow me, or akoletheto, is in the present tense. It commands a continuous, habitual, step-by-step walk of obedience.
So there is a definitive break followed by a continuous walk.
Yes. You decisively break with the old self at a point in time, and then you continually daily walk in the footsteps of the Master.
This grammar totally refutes the modern notion that you can simply add Jesus to your life as a convenient accessory.
Like a bumper sticker or a new app on your phone.
Right. While you still maintain total control of the steering wheel, that just doesn't fit the text at all.
Not even a little bit.
Jesus doesn't just issue these intense commands and expect blind obedience, though.
Yeah.
He provides an airtight logical sequence. He appeals to our capacity to calculate value.
He gives us the ledger of eternity in verses 35 through 37.
Yes, we hit this massive paradox of preservation. Whoever desires to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for Christ and the gospel will save it.
It is a stunning reversal of human logic.
Then Jesus shifts into this financial calculation, weighing the gaining of the whole world, ton klasman holon, against the forfeiting of the soul. How does this mathematical equation work?
The logical progression here is bound together by the Greek conjunction gar, meaning for or because, which is repeated at the beginning of verses 35, 36, 37, and 38.
So he is laying out a structured argument.
He is laying down the theological grounds for his command. The paradox of saving and losing centers on the Greek word psyche.
Psyche, that usually gets translated as soul, right?
Yes. In classical Greek philosophy, psyche often referred to a disembodied immortal spirit floating in the ether. But in the biblical Semitic thought world, psyche means the entire person, the seat of life, your true identity, your eternal self.
The core of who you are.
Right. So Jesus sets up a hypothetical scenario using commercial judicial language. Suppose a brilliant Wall Street speculator successfully corners the market on the entire physical universe.
He executes a hostile takeover of the globe.
Exactly. He gains all the wealth, all the real estate, all the political authority, and all the pleasures the world can offer. But the price of that acquisition is the forfeiture of his psyche.
The ultimate bad trade.
The text uses the word antilagma, which means a ransom or a substitutionary price. Christ is stating a mathematical absolute. If a soul is lost, if it is foreclosed upon by the justice of God, the entire physical universe lacks the currency to buy it back.
You cannot liquidate the solar system to purchase your soul from hell.
The ledger is eternally bankrupt.
This calculation forces us to look at modern, respectable worldliness in a completely different light. A person does not need to engage in scandalous, headline-making rebellion to waste their life.
Polite idolatry accomplishes the very same eternal bankruptcy.
Yes, polite idolatry. You can go to a polite church, have a beautiful family, drive a nice car, keep your lawn perfectly manicured, and build a massive 401k.
But if all of that is built without Christ as the supreme treasure, it is just a well-decorated road to ruin.
Bringing this into the modern context, we see the massive global rise of the prosperity gospel.
Which is a tragic phenomenon.
It really is.
Yeah.
If the math is this clear, if Jesus literally forces a person to calculate the absolute worthlessness of gaining the whole world at the expense of the soul, how does an entire movement read these exact verses and still manage to equate material wealth with divine favor?
It boggles the mind, doesn't it?
How do they read this and say, yes, Jesus wants me to have a private jet?
The prosperity gospel achieves that by entirely ignoring the logical mechanism of Christ's cross. It is the modern manifestation of Peter's satanic rebuke.
Oh, that is a sharp connection. It is the theology of glory all over again.
Yes, it takes the natural desires of the fallen human heart, greed, comfort, status, health, and baptizes them in religious terminology. To the Reformed mind, the prosperity gospel is not a minor theological variation or a difference in worship style.
It is an abominable distortion of the truth.
It instructs people to fiercely hoard the very things Christ commands them to crucify. When a movement teaches that the evidence of God's blessing is a massive bank account or a life free from sickness, it is telling its followers to engage in the very transaction Jesus called catastrophic bankruptcy.
It encourages them to gain the world while their souls quietly rot.
Jesus makes it clear that the poorest believer in the slums, who possesses absolutely nothing but Christ, is infinitely richer than the wealthiest billionaire who stands on the precipice of a lost eternity without an advocate.
That economic calculation leads directly to the final courtroom scene in verse 38, where the currency being traded is no longer money, but shame and glory.
Yes, Christ gives this severe warning.
He says that whoever is ashamed of him and his words in this adulterous and sinful generation, the Son of Man will also be ashamed of them when he returns in glory with the holy angels.
In this verse, Jesus binds his person and his words inextricably together. You cannot claim to love the person of Jesus while being embarrassed by his exclusive claims, his hard doctrines, or his moral commands.
You cannot separate the two.
To be ashamed of his words regarding the reality of eternal judgment, the necessity of the cross, or the biblical definition of holiness is to be ashamed of Christ himself.
He uses the phrase adulterous generation. That has a very specific ring to it.
It does. The term carries heavy covenantal weight from the Old Testament, pointing to spiritual unfaithfulness, like a spouse cheating on their vows. Jesus is elevating the daily local battle against social peer pressure to a cosmic eternal level.
So our daily choices have cosmic weight.
He is saying that your willingness to bear the shame of the cross in the present theater of time is the ultimate diagnostic of whether you will share in the vindication of the Son of Man when the skies roll back and the final judgment begins.
Okay, hold on. This brings up a massive problem for me. I need to push back here.
Please do. What is the tension you are seeing?
Because if we are looking at this through a reformed perspective, I am terrified. If the standard is that I have to lose my life entirely, perfectly deny myself, completely sever my ties with self-ownership, and never once be ashamed of Christ,
I am doomed. That is a very honest assessment.
I cannot even donate to a charity without feeling a little bit proud of myself. My self-denial is always flawed. Even my best moments of sacrifice are tainted by selfish motives.
Which is true for all of us.
Right. So if my salvation rests on my ability to carry this cross perfectly, doesn't this just create an exhausting, anxious treadmill of guilt and works righteousness? How does a person actually read Mark 8 and walk away with joy instead of crushing despair?
That is the most vital question you can ask, because without the doctrine of justification by faith alone, Mark 8 becomes a crushing burden of legalism.
It would crush us completely.
If our salvation rested on the perfection of our self-denial, every single human being would be eternally condemned. We must read this text through the lens of imputed righteousness.
Imputed righteousness, the great exchange.
Yes. We recognize that Jesus Christ is the only human who has ever perfectly fulfilled the demands of this text. He did not shout commands from heaven that he was unwilling to fulfill himself.
He lived it out perfectly.
In the incarnation, Christ perfectly denied himself. In Gethsemane, he submitted his human will entirely to the Father's decree, sweating drops of blood. On the cross, he bore the ultimate shame, naked and despised.
So he accomplished the perfect obedience that we could not.
To use a financial metaphor, we rely on Christ's passive and active obedience. His passive obedience means he paid our massive debt on the cross. He wiped the account to zero.
But wiping the debt to zero just leaves us at zero, right?
Right. But his active obedience, his perfect law-keeping, his flawless self-denial is credited to our account through faith alone. It is as if $1 billion of righteousness is deposited into our empty account.
That is the monergistic grace we cling to.
When God looks at the believer, he does not see our flawed, stumbling attempts at self-denial. He sees the perfect, unwasted life of Jesus Christ.
So it's not just that my debt is forgiven. I am actually declared infinitely wealthy in righteousness because of what Jesus did.
Yes, you are covered in his perfection.
Knowing that the cross we carry is the fruit of our sanctification, not the ground of our justification, completely shifts our motivation.
It changes everything.
We do not carry a cross to earn our way into heaven. We carry it out of immense gratitude because the King has already secured the kingdom for us.
The pressure to be perfect is off, which actually frees us to take radical risks for the gospel.
This leads right into the modern application of the text, which is an uncompromising refusal of the suburban dream.
Yes, the sources call for a total rejection of minimal morality.
I look at minimal morality like finding the Christian loophole. It is the college student who spends hours trying to calculate the absolute lowest grade they can get on a final exam and still pass the class.
That is a brilliant way to describe it.
They don't love the subject, they just want the credit with the least amount of effort possible.
Minimal morality is a toxic mindset that infects much of Western Christianity. It is the attitude that constantly calculates how close one can get to the line of sin without technically crossing it.
It is playing games with holiness.
It seeks to maximize earthly pleasure, build the perfect retirement plan, and maintain a thin veneer of religious respectability. It is the cultural dream of spending one's final years simply collecting seashells, playing golf, and waiting to die.
But a life Consumed by a single passion for God's glory does not operate that way. If someone is constantly asking, how much of the world can I enjoy without technically sinning, it exposes what they truly treasure.
It shows that their heart is captivated by the world, and they view God as a strict hall monitor they have to appease to avoid hell.
The unwasted life stands in stark contrast to the terminal pointlessness of secular existentialism.
It is perfectly illustrated by Samuel Beckett's famous play, Waiting for Godot.
Oh, I have read that. It is bleak.
Extremely bleak. The characters spend their entire existence waiting on a desolate road for a meaning that never arrives. They just pass the time with trivialities.
But rejecting that empty waiting doesn't mean everyone has to quit their jobs, sell all their possessions, and move to a foreign country to be a full-time missionary, right?
No, not at all.
A lot of people hear radical discipleship and think they have to abandon their ordinary lives. But everyday vocations matter. A mechanic fixing a transmission, a mother changing a diaper at 2 a.m., a programmer writing lines of code, or an artist painting a canvas. Can they live this unwasted life right where they are?
Absolutely. The single passion for God's glory does not erase distinct callings. The difference is the orientation of the heart and the mechanism behind the work.
So it is about the why behind what they are doing.
Are these vocations being used to build a personal kingdom, or are they platforms to display the supremacy of Christ? True discipleship often looks like hidden perseverance.
Because the world measures success by visibility, by the size of the platform, the number of followers, or the volume of applause.
But the kingdom of God operates on an entirely different metric. The daily, unglamorous choices to put to death the deeds of the flesh are where the battle is won.
Give me some examples of what that looks like on the ground.
It is telling the truth at work when a lie would easily protect your reputation and secure a promotion. It is forgiving a spouse when you have been deeply wronged.
Those quiet moments of obedience.
Yes, it is faithfully reading scripture to your children when you are physically exhausted at the end of the day. It is giving generously when it actually cuts into your standard of living.
So it is a daily, habitual surrender.
When you stop asking, what is the bare minimum required? And start asking, how can I leverage every breath, every talent, and every dollar to maximize the glory of Christ? You have crossed the threshold into the unwasted life. You have stopped decorating the passing world and started investing in the eternal city.
We have covered a massive amount of ground today, tracing this shift from the subjective self-corrected illusion of our modern age to the historically grounded, radically demanding, yet entirely grace-filled reality of the cross.
It is a heavy but beautiful reality.
We started with Bob Dylan's feelings and moved to the blood-soaked sands of Nero's Rome. We looked at the intense Greek grammar of severing ties with self-ownership, the terrifying mathematics of gaining the world but losing the soul, and the glorious freedom found in the imputed righteousness of Christ, which frees us to abandon the empty suburban dream of minimal morality.
As we bring this examination to a close, consider a final thought regarding what truly lasts.
What do you have in mind?
Well, the most unwasted lives in human history might be completely invisible to the eyes of the world.
Invisible.
Yes. Picture a hidden saint, perhaps an elderly woman who prays fervently in the early hours of the morning for a neighborhood that ignores her. She repents quickly of her hidden sins.
A quiet faithfulness.
She endures social reproach and physical pain without a hint of bitterness. She gives out of her poverty, much like the widow's mite in the Gospels, dropping her last coins into the offering.
Her life looks like nothing to the culture around her.
But that hidden, obscure life, lived entirely under the lordship of Jesus Christ, may shine infinitely brighter before the returning Son of Man than the most famous philanthropist or the most celebrated religious leader who relied on human applause. The ledger of heaven records the quietest acts of self-denial.
That is a staggering reality to weigh. It completely flips our cultural values upside down. So I want to address you listening right now.
Yes, take this to heart.
I leave you with this question to audit your own ledger today as you go back to your commute, your office, or your living room. Are you spending your brief vapor of an existence decorating the prison of self? Or are you ready to throw your life away for the sake of the King? Thank you for joining us for this session of Reformed Thinking.